thing that I wanted to highlight here is just overall trends in terms of the tech jobs. I know this is probably on a lot of people's mind given the layoffs, ongoing news of the layoffs, where every quarter basically there's something happening. So let's go through a couple of these charts on the super high level. The ones on the left side, so I believe all these are from Indeed, but the first one, so top left-hand side, it showcases the trend of tech jobs related to everything else. So as you can see, there was that peak during the COVID, right? And then a sharp decrease, including the layoffs and so on. Now, decrease is not necessarily just AI, it's also due to massive and very significant overhiring during the COVID itself. It also has to do some of the other external factors like R&D tax credit, for instance, and so on, right? The chart below, also on the left side, it shows the layoffs. So it kind of gives you high-level overview of some of those big companies that were doing massive layoffs. And that kind of compounds the impact, right? Because you have less openings, but at the same time, more people laid off, meaning, especially from FAANG-like companies, meaning a lot of them are getting recycled and filling in some of those limited openings. Chart on the right-hand side shows the trend of the AI relative to the tech listings. So the tech listings, in the dark green, it's the absolute number. On the right-hand side, you see the light green, which shows the relative. So not the absolute number, but the relative increase, steady increase of the AI, especially in the recent quarters. And this is projected to keep growing. AI-specific roles or roles that maybe are not AI-specific, but do require some AI knowledge. One of the things that we'll be talking about today is on a super high level, what are the expectations to get into FAANG companies and some of the other highly sought startups and some of the other hot companies on the market. So I know this is a lot of information here, but due to time limit, I'm going to try keep it short and sweet. Consistent bar raising across the board, right? So it's not just about specific competencies. It's not like coding and design are more important, but it's also behavioral. If you're entering for higher level roles, leadership, and so on. So some of those other signals are super important. So you need to be well-rounded, ideally without significant red flags. Now, sure, there's no candidates that are going to be perfect, and the candidates that are going to raise a bar across all the competencies. They're super rare, but you want to minimize the the yellow or red flags, especially. The impact and ownership needs to be super clear. So the impact in terms of not just financial impact, but also whether it's strategic or operational or whatever it is, right? So throughout of course, the interview and your resume, you need to demonstrate and ideally quantify, back it up with some sort of data, the impact that you made using non-confidential data points. Complexity needs to be there, meaning, okay, you had a great impact. What was the complexity? What did you need to deliver? How complex was it, not just technically, but also in terms of the people complexity, how many dependencies, potentially, legal and other hurdles you need to jump through and so on. That depends on the role, right? So not all the roles are expected to go through that. Ownership also is ownership of some of the other behavioral principles are expected depending on a company. We can get into that more. Actually, we have one of the later slides. The last one is structured communication. So whatever the role you're entering for, whether it's a junior engineer or a VP, there is expectation that you are a great communicator, right? Obviously, the bar varies depending on their level of experience and role, but you need to be able to communicate and explain to the interviewers your thought process. You need to be able to make sure that they understand you, you understand them. So communication, both verbal and written, is critical. The 4 boxes here below go in a little bit more details around the first one, the data structure and algorithms. So it's a typical coding questions where you need to clarify the requirements, demonstrate great fundamentals in terms of data structure and so on, great problem solving, application algorithms, writing clean code, explaining what the code does, and analyzing code in terms of its complexity. System designs kind of similar. So system designs, Here, ambiguity, dealing with ambiguity is even more important. A lot of them are left ambiguous by design, so you need to be sharp around clarifying, reading between the lines, and clarifying functional, non-functional requirements, and driving the discussion. Right, designing the scalable, reliable systems, often low latency, and dealing with some of those requirements. Throughout system design, you need to be able to communicate what are you designing, why. Pretty much every system design decision in interview setting has more than one option, so you need to communicate why you're picking certain option, why, what are the trade-offs, what are the assumptions you're making, and keep the interviewer on board, and so on. Behavioral rounds are very important. So here, any kind of non-technical questions, you need to be able to demonstrate how you were able to raise the bar, whatever the question is. And generally, there's a couple types of questions. There is a situational, and these are actually the most frequent, which is tell me about a time, so something that asks you about a specific example. So you pick the best example you have, you answer it in a star format, and when you're doing that, you need to make sure that you demonstrate the impact. Why was it critical to the team, to the company? Why was it complex? How you navigated that complexity? So when you're talking about it through the actions that you took, how you exercised the good judgment, how you went above and beyond, and so on. And then obviously the result, right? What happened, and why is it successful, and so on. Ideally, you would map these to leadership principles, or if some companies don't have leadership principles, at least their high-level culture. So typically, prior to the interview, ideally you would know what those are, right? So that way you can help interviewer connect the dots on how you're raising the bar in whatever areas they're looking at. Ownership, customer focus, bias for action. These are just some common example of some common leadership principles, but there is a lot others depending on the company. And then the last box here is AI perspective. So do you have common knowledge of AI? Are you AI enabled in your domain? Now, on what bar or how much of that is required depends on the role. But if it is required, are you able to talk about some of your AI artifacts, examples, projects that you did, the judgment that you took, and what are some of the considerations that you made, and so on. Note some of this could be covered in a system design, in specific system design questions as well. Here we're going to go over some of the more detailed view into expectations depending on the role and level. We will start with engineers. Now, given that there's a lot of different roles, so there's basically 17 different tracks as outlined in the previous slide, and there's some other additional specialty roles. Here we're going to aggregate some of them. So this slide, it's software applies to software engineers, but not just the full stack engineers. Applies to back end, front end, mobile engineers, and so on. For other specialty roles like science, data engineering, and so on, Sam will cover those later on. So this applies to the other kinds, like I mentioned, including testing engineers and so on. What I like to clarify here is early, mid, senior. So it's basically a categorization depending on experience. What that experience exactly is, it depends on a company. So typically early is up to a couple of years experience. Mid could be couple to 6 to 10 years experience. It really depends. Some folks are getting promoted to the next level faster than the others, but it's just a very high level ballpark to give you an idea. Anyhow, and then the other thing before I start going through the actual rubrics is here we are comparing on a super high level across 3 categories. So skills and scope, AI aware, and interview signals. So expectations across those 3 on a very high level to give you an idea. But there's others, more detailed ones as well that we will not get to. So for instance, some technical specifics and so on. Anyhow, kind of starting on the early engineers or relatively junior engineers. So expectations around skills and scope. It's well defined. So you're working on a small to medium tasks. You might need some hand holding or have some hand holding when it comes to the more complex system designs or dealing with some of the higher level ambiguity or help negotiating with the stakeholders. And you might have a mentor or getting that help from your manager and so on. In terms of AI aware, it's basically day-to-day stuff, right? Are you aware of the tools that help you produce code faster and with some of those other daily tasks? In terms of interview signals, this is a relatively wide area. But on a very high level, it's fundamentals are critical, right? So you're expected to have strong fundamentals. So data structures, algorithms, and so on should be able to produce a working code quickly, analyze it. System design, you're not expected to be able to design very complex systems, but you should be able to at least have a high level knowledge of system design and be able to drive some of the discussion in interview because system designs are covered, right? So it's system design is still there. And then potential is super critical. So ability and willingness to learn new things and being excited about and ideally having some sort of artifacts or track record on continuously learning new things and so on. Because the potential here is very critical. No company hires junior engineers with the goal of them staying junior after a few years, right? So you need to show that potential getting to the next level. Now, here we get into the mid-level engineers. Here, skills and scope, especially scope, grows. So even though you're still operating mainly within a single team, you are driving bigger projects end to end. So you're able to design, in some cases, some more complex systems. You mentor more junior folks. So here you're becoming a force multiplier and delivering to others. You are becoming also a little bit more independent. So you might have some of the conversations without support of your manager with cross-functional stakeholders like product or science and so on, or other teams. So the scope and the skills is growing. As part of skills, you might be becoming a SME or subject matter expert in one of the areas within the team and so on. So the ownership is growing as well. In terms of AI aware, you're starting to have a industry level working knowledge of the AI. So integrating AI models into the existing systems, starting to recognize when to use AI and for which situations and so on. In terms of interview signals, everything from before from the junior engineers applies, but here the problem solving and ability to solve more complex problems is expected. So especially when it comes to the system design. So you should be able to design end-to-end more complex systems, talk about different trade-offs, different options. In terms of the coding, you similarly as before, you producing working code and so on, but you are able to solve a little bit harder problems with more optimal bigger complexity and so on. Moving to senior roles, so here scope continues to grow. So you operate across teams, so you're not working within an individual team, but you operate across team, and what that means is you're executing. You have evidence of executing and leading project across multiple teams, multiple dependencies. You are driving design and architecture and aligning with multiple teams on some of those more complex designs that impact not just systems within your team, but across. You are becoming a larger force multiplier, so you are not just mentoring one-offs, but you are providing and setting a good higher bar in terms of operational excellence, engineering excellence. So you are sharing some of those best practices across teams. You are also identifying a new use of technology and so on. When it comes to that, that's a good segue into the next AI aware. So here you evaluate and optimize AI solutions, and you actually propose. So you are your manager's right-hand person in terms of identifying, analyzing, and proposing some of the new technology for solving specific business problems and so on. In terms of interview signals, again, similar as before for the other two roles applies, but here strategic thinking is important, right? So here, what's special looked at is in terms of technical. So coding is pretty much the same. You need to be a great coder and so on. System design, same thing. You need to be able to very effectively solve system design problems and articulate different trade-offs, different options, come up with optimal system design solutions and so on. But when it comes to behavioral, you should also demonstrate strategic thinking and how you're able to not just work project by project, but how you're influencing the roadmap. How are you providing inputs and technical strategy into roadmap planning, and not just roadmap planning, but a longer term, say for instance, 3-year architectural plan or multi-year architectural planning and vision for your team and potential beyond. So that strategic part needs to be there, as well as independently working with cross-functional stakeholders, driving those discussions, aligning with product, with science, with data engineering, testing, legal, whatever it is. All right, quick time check. I think I'll need to speed up a little bit. Anyhow, moving to the next slide for managers. We're gonna start with the engineer managers, and like I mentioned earlier, it's not just engineer managers, but other people managers as well. So early engineer managers, typically again up to a couple of years. Scope is relatively small. Team is well defined and on the smaller side. 5 to 10 folks max, generally speaking. A roadmap is limited and well defined, and you are getting some help from your manager in terms of strategic thinking and so on. AI aware, in terms of being AI aware, you understand the basic tools, usage, and so on. You are driving usage of those within your team and making sure that engineers are using them effectively to speed up development and so on. In terms of interview signals, you need to demonstrate potential moving to the growing in scope and moving to the next level, and driving some of the best EM practices across roadmap planning, performance management within your team. So we're managing poor performers, top performers, and promotions, hiring, working with stakeholders, and negotiating conflict resolution both within the team, outside the team, and so on. Moving to the mid-level managers. Here, generally speaking, you still own a single team, although the team is larger. Some mid-level managers that are a little bit closer to getting the senior might manage other managers or potentially multiple teams without a manager in between. So the scope is growing. They're more independent, work more independently across other stakeholders, driving that alignment when it comes to roadmap planning and vision overall across engineering, product, science, and so on. They are also defining some of the processes as a standards within their team, but in some cases beyond on a org level and so on. In terms of AI aware, they guide the team and provide guardrails in terms of AI adoption and establishing clear goals. So they are driving the innovation and enforcing it within the team. Interview signals, the charter and the scope needs to be clear and similar as before. So they're applying all the best practices, right? But here the scope, the impact that they bring it to the table or that they had needs to be clear. How they were able to do so independently. So how they are building the roadmap by working with critical stakeholders and their leadership, how they are executing complex projects or help their team execute complex projects across multiple other teams and dependencies, defining best processes and practices across teams and so on. So the scope is bigger and overall judgment and so on. Senior managers, moving here to senior managers, same applies to directors and VPs. Titling varies across companies. Director in one company could be senior manager in another, and so on. But anyhow, generally, these are folks that manage multiple teams and have multiple managers underneath them. So same applies as before in terms of at least the experience and knowledge. But here, the scope is bigger. So they manage a larger organization. As part of that, they're driving best practices and keeping their managers accountable to do so across their larger organization. But they also are more involved in the overall strategic direction on either company level, depending how big the company is, or organizational level as well. So that means working with other senior engineering managers or directors or whatever it is on aligning with the roadmaps, strategic vision, charters in terms of the organizational structure across different organizations, some of those trade-offs and so on. So you operate on a next level, right? And that's expected. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the interview signals. In terms of AI aware, again, more strategically, so identifying business portfolios and some of the product vision where use of AI could be helpful, and identifying the AI portfolio bets and developing ethical guidelines and providing overall high-level guidance to the investments and to the when it comes to investments to engineer managers and so on, working more closely with principal engineers or architects and delegating some of that work to them as well. In terms of interview signals, again, because the scope is bigger, so need to be able to demonstrate how you're able to do that on a tactical individual team level when needed, because ideally you'll be delegating that, but also on a more higher level. So not just on your level, but higher up. So how are you able to drive some of the critical organizational decisions? Why when you're talking about stories or the examples when you did that, they talk about impact, the complexity, how you navigate it, and make sure that your judgment and strategic thinking is coming clear as well. Uh, Again, this is just a sneak peek into some of those, but there's a lot of other things as well that are not mentioned here around the roadmap planning, the project execution, large initiative execution, goal setting, hiring, and building the teams, the performance management, and how, in this case, they're keeping the bar high across their teams and across managers and so on. Moving to the TPM role or technical program managers. Early TPM's scope is relatively defined, so they're working on a not super complex projects that have dozens of dependencies or hundreds of dependencies, but they're a little bit smaller, less ambiguity in terms of scope. They're not multi-year projects and so on. So they have clear objectives and are, again, in terms of the timeline, a bit smaller, AI aware, so they understand the fundamentals, fundamental life cycles, and are able to carry on the discussions related to AI and so on. In terms of interview signals, TPMs, the junior TPMs need to be able to demonstrate how they are able to execute projects. So again, not uber complex projects, but with decent complexity, how they're able to do so, follow the best practices when it comes to project management, stakeholder management, right? Defining project roadmap, milestones, goals, how they communicate across the teams, how they manage expectations, how they deal with the project bottlenecks, all the good stuff, right? And managing key stakeholders as well. So that's on a super high level, some of the interview signals. Conflict resolution, that's another thing that's I forgot to mention, but that applies across the board, every role basically. Mid-level TPMs, here scope is getting a little bit bigger. So mid-level TPMs, they should be able to drive a bigger, more complex projects that are multi-quarter, in some case, maybe even multi-year projects with a large number of dependencies, large number of EMs, principal engineers, data scientists, managers, and whatnot to deal with. Product managers, the same thing. So they are able to drive those things across a much wider organization or multiple organizations effectively with time, applying some of those best practices. In some cases, introducing those practices across other TPMs or other projects to be followed, and so on. In terms of AI aware, they integrate evaluation gates and privacy checks into AI project. That's for TPMs that specialize into the AI domain. For TPMs, more of general TPMs that where maybe projects are not super specialized to AI, they should be aware of the specific solutions or business problems where AI could be helpful, and be able to probe engineering decisions, ask engineering teams right questions around why not using AI in a specific thing or some of the trade-offs, and be helpful in those kind of discussions. In terms of interview signals, same thing applies as junior TPMs, but here the strategic thinking in terms of the both project and program execution needs to be there. And when I say project versus program, so project is you have something that's defined, right, and you execute it working with all the dependencies and so on. When I say program, it's not necessarily just one project, but you're driving a program where there's a certain output metric that you need to improve. And how you do that, it could be through multiple projects, or it could be through process improvements, or it could be through something else, right? So here you will be evaluated on both. How much each one matters, it depends on company, and in some case on an organization or a specific role as well. But you'll be expected to be up the bar on both. Senior TPMs, and this applies to principal TPMs as well. Scope continues to increase. So here they could be working across the whole company. So working or driving critical initiatives on a company level, depending on a company side. Company's size. So for instance, for Amazon, okay, I wouldn't expect principal TPM drive something on company level, but at least on an organizational level. So something like VP, for instance, or in some case even across multiple VPs. So number of teams, dependencies that are able to manage that exponentially grows. So they're able to effectively scale themselves to successfully drive these super complex multi-year initiatives, negotiate with the stakeholders, define the roadmap, influence some of the even product decisions and engineering decisions, and so on. In terms of AI aware, what's mentioned here, standardizing AI PMO patterns and best practices across the organization. That's true for TPMs specializing in AI domain. TPMs that are not necessarily working on projects or programs where AI is heavily utilized, they still need to be able to have a good judgment around where AI could be helpful and potentially have good stories where they implemented that for their projects, or at least drove and influenced decision making on when AI would be used. Interview signals, similar applies as before, but in addition to that, they need to demonstrate that complexity around dealing across much wider list of stakeholders, cross-functional stakeholders. They need to have better stories around conflict resolutions. So, for instance, resolving conflict with, say, an EM, well, that's too tactical for this level. Looking at something more, resolving conflicts with either multiple EMs or directors or potentially VP. So they're able to operate on that more strategic level and influence at a high level as well. The impact also is much bigger. So the impact here, we're not talking about $1 million here and there, like if we're talking about impact in terms of the revenue, for instance, but driving much larger projects with higher impact. Whatever the data point they're using for impact, it could be revenue, but it could be something else. It could be like a customer impact or a more technical impact. It's if the project is more technical in the nature and so on. Moving to the project managers. So here it's relatively similar, starting with early PMs. The scope is relatively limited and isolated to either a very small product or a feature level or a couple features within existing product. So they are not necessarily thinking about super high level in terms of strategy and setting up product vision, but more kind of feature by feature or smaller product scope. And as part of that, they are working with engineering teams, or at least one engineering team, the counterpart of the EM, and so on. In terms of AI aware, they are aware of the high-level use of AI applications within their scope, where it could potentially be used, and working, collaborating with the engineering and others to validate some of those things and so on. Interview signals. So on a super high level, they need to be able to demonstrate that they are able to work through ambiguity, at least on a feature level, and deliver it. So define the requirements, work effectively with the engineering and other technical teams to deliver it, define the launch criteria, monitor, not just monitor, but evaluate the success of the product as it goes, propose improvements, and so on. So all that is isolated kind of on a feature or smaller product level. Mid-level PMs here, they're starting to own the full product. So as part of that, they are owning the product roadmap and vision. So they own defining the product and product roadmap and vision. As part of that, they work and collaborate with their engineering counterparts, other product stakeholders, science, legal, customer representatives, or whatever the other cross-functional teams might be. So the scope is bigger and the impact is bigger. So it's not here feature by feature, but it's actually, they own the actual product of a decent complexity and impact. In terms of AI aware, they define success metrics and evaluation frameworks, and work more closely with the engineers on the feasibility of some of those things, and making sure that's accounted in the roadmap overall. In terms of interview signals, there's some of that high level strategic thinking needs to be there, and also impact and ability to work independently. So independently figure out product strategy, figure out all the ambiguities, how to validate decisions, whether it's a proof of concepts or user studies, or whether using customer signals or whatever it is. So figuring out the product strategy, showcasing good judgment there, and ability to influence others, including engineering, the partner engineering teams. Senior PMs, this applies to principal PMs as well. Here, the scope goes beyond that. So it's either owning a a product vision and strategy for a super complex product where they might actually delegate things to more junior PMs, or they actually own a larger product portfolio, meaning that consists something that consists of multiple products. So as part of that, the vision is broader. They're working with high-level folks on more strategic investments. The impact also there is higher and wider as well, because here we're talking about the portfolio of multiple products. They work with a larger number of stakeholders and need to influence them. So again, both functional, non-functional, and so technical, non-technical, and so on. In terms of AI aware, they identify opportunities for a longer term and on that more strategic level where AI could be used, working with their PM peers and some of the more junior folks, delegating some of that decisions and those studies to them, but also engineering leaders as well. In terms of interview signals, they need to influence widest set of stakeholders. So here you're working and influencing not senior and principal PMs or your peers, but it's expected you work with VPs of business, directors of business, driving the strategy, not just year by year roadmap, but longer term, 3 to 5 years in some cases, depending on the company and so on. So that's in a nutshell, keeping it on a high level. Here, as we are moving to the next set of roles and levels that Sam will be covering, I will take a quick break and stop sharing and see if we have any critical questions or anything that we would like to address. Rohan or Sam, sorry, I can't see the Q&A right now, but
I'll just check once. I think the three questions in the Q&A, we can take it up in the end. Let me just drop a small nudge to the folks. Folks, we'll be having we would love to have a engaging conversation in the end. So do drop in your questions with the AMA. We have Somashish, we have Senad, your questions related to your career progression, be it regards to into Kickstart offerings, how the market is shaping up, any topic that you can think of. I think just drop in the questions in the Q&A and we'll take most, if not all, in the end. We'll be happy to take some live questions as well. Thanks. Somashish, you can continue.
Sure. You guys can hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so Sanad has already covered in great details about kind of typically the signals that people are looking for when they hire for specific roles. I will go into more of these IC roles and how those rules translate into the IC world. Now, without going into the nitty-gritties of details, I mean, the thing that I want everyone to understand is that there are certain fundamental signals that people are looking to hire when there's a role that is defined. For example, wait, sorry. I have the wrong slide in here. Yeah, okay. So say, for example, you're trying to hire a machine learning engineer, and typically for a junior machine learning engineer, the expectation is that you should be able to implement and fine-tune existing models. For a mid-level, design and build machine learning systems, and for a senior, I mean, architect systems. Now, having said that, these, number one, what is a machine learning engineer is changing. This is changing every day. That has been changing for the last 2 years. And maybe 2 years back, there was an agreed upon definition of a machine learning engineer for the industry as such. That doesn't exist. And I can give you an example. For example, if you've been following the machine learning world, you're probably aware of the Netflix recommender system. I mean, it's a very famous project. Netflix spent years, I mean, building it up, and it's actually does a pretty good job. I mean, where it gives you a good recommendation of movies you should be watching. That project took about 2 years and cost millions of dollars. That same effort cannot be spent today. In 2025, no company will spend 2 years to build a recommender system, no matter how important that is to their course of business. So, what Netflix specifically is doing today is building something called small language models. Their recommendations are powered by something called small language model. So now if you're interviewing, so there may be an AI engineer role, may not be an AI engineer role, but even as a machine learning engineer, if you're interviewing, the boundaries are not supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement learning. You are expected to be AI aware. You are expected to propose AI alternatives which are quicker, easier to implement, and understand the trade-offs. So if I implement a solution with tons of data, building a recommender system over 2 years, it's probably going to be more accurate and kind of very context sensitive. Whereas if I build the same solution overnight, over a weekend, using Gen AI, there will be lots of gotchas. I mean, obviously, it will not perform the same way. But point is, ROI of the other system is way, way higher than the ROI of the first system. So this awareness is very, very important for literally every single role that you interview for. And unfortunately, this is not always specified, even in the job description. That I mean, what is the requirement that is expected out of that? So anything that is in and around your domain or the breadth of your expanse is expected to be known. You need to know. So if you're a machine learning engineer, you probably should need to know what's the attention mechanism, and you generally have to be aware. That is across early, mid, senior. Let's take the example of a data engineer. Now, data engineers had very clear roles that, okay, I have to provide insight. So I get my data from the production database, maybe a few external data sets, and then I amalgamate, put them all together through ETL pipelines and provide insights to company. That doesn't exist today. A lot of data today is just plain logs. So what logs? That's also not very well defined. Software engineering most of the time doesn't even know what to log. So you need an insight. You want to find out whether my agent is behaving well or not, or the company needs an insight. So a data engineer actually has to go all the way back to the software engineer, instrument what needs to be logged, and then work through the whole process and get the data. This is the awareness that companies are looking across roles, early, mid, senior, for a data engineer. And that's again, well, the role might be advertised as a data engineering role, but the requirements of the roles are unclear and they're very fuzzy. And this is something that you definitely need to be kind of very well aware of when you go for an interview. I mean, just talking about facts and dimensional modeling is not likely going to cut it anymore. Data scientist, classic example. Data scientists had very clear statistical definition. As a matter of fact, I mean, if you go back even 2 years, I mean, data scientists and machine learning engineers used to do completely different tasks. If you have a very clearly defined statistical periphery of a metric that you're trying to arrive at, it's most likely going to be tasked to a data scientist. If you have long-term, bigger solution with more data, kind of more training sets, then it's probably going to be a machine learning engineer. All of that is going away. Now, again, when I say going away, maybe there are companies, there are few, maybe one or two companies where these definitions are still kind of held sacred, and people are still doing things that they used to do 2 years back. But for the rest of the world, that's not the case. Because of this amalgamation of roles and expansion of scope of each of these roles, literally every role needs you to be aware of how uh, AI fits into the scope of things. And in addition to the existing interview signals that were required, say, for example, for a senior data scientist or principal data scientist, you should be able to generate insights that influence business strategy and drives the business in the right direction. Now, that has to come in a more generative AI aware manner, and that is like a given expectation today. Data analyst. Data analyst, as a matter of fact, even this role is, the way I see it, is almost vanishing. I mean, and this role has been redefined over the last 2 years as analytics engineer. Some form of engineering has entered this role. And again, for the simple reason, the reason engineering has entered is because there's a whole deluge of products which are very AI sensitive products, and companies expect you to use these products and deliver the insights. So the fundamental expectation an analyst to analyze data and derive insight is still there. That's not going away. But the way you do it and the throughput of expectation from each of these roles are dramatically changing. And this is why, again, you need to be fundamentally aware of AI to drive literally any signal. I mean, at one point of time, a principal data analyst would, I mean, principal data analyst probably wasn't the role. I mean, by that level of seniority, you'll probably be considered more of a data scientist. But a senior level data analyst was expected to articulate strategic impact of data analysis on business. Now they are expected to engineer the jobs that drive these insights. So maybe at some point of time or in the past, the expectation was someone else will engineer the job, someone else will set up the pipeline, someone else will work with you to get these things. Today, that's no longer the case because someone else doesn't actually know what you need. What you need to drive the insights of modern business is unknown and fuzzy. And that is the reason the breadth of knowledge is expected out of literally every single role. So you get where I'm going with this. So this is a reality. The more you make yourself aware of, I think, and the faster you make yourself aware of, the better it would be. Now, I see a question actually in one of the questions. I mean, I don't want to answer the question per se, but like, does AI replace the resource completely? I think you need to stop thinking in this manner that there would be a one-to-one replacement of human skills with AI skills. That's not going to happen. AI still needs a lot of humans in the loop. That what is actually happening is the nature of work is changing. The nature of work is changing at a very fast pace in smaller companies, which are startup sized or kind of slightly smaller sized. They're probably a little slower in FAANG and Fortune 50 companies, but it's happening. It's still happening in all companies. So today, if you're looking for a job and you're preparing to upskill yourself and be employable for the next 5 to 10 years, you need to be AI aware, and that's like a de facto expectation. Now, this, I mean, I would go so far as to say that literally every single job that exists in the market will transition in some shape and form. Now, this could be just expanding the scope or breadth of knowledge that is expected out of the job, which itself is a very, very hard task, actually. Or it could completely transition into something else. I mean, this role, for example, data, as I said, data analysts, very few companies are hiring data analysts today. They're hiring analytics engineer. Analytics engineer is a more suitable role. It's more of a future-proof role that people are looking to hire. So whatever you do, wherever you're going, you have to be aware of AI because AI will disrupt every single industry that exists today. And the more you are aware of it, the more you understand how it's disrupting, you can prepare yourself. This is not something one person can just give you. It's not a tablet. And even if it was a tablet, I mean, the tablet for today will not be the same tablet for 3 months down the line. So you need to learn and upskill yourself on AI and then derive these insights for your own and answer these questions for your own that, okay, this is the role that I'm preparing for today. Where is it going? And you will be able to answer these questions very easily when you understand what AI is doing and how AI helps today and how is it likely going to help in the days to come. So now this is primarily for people who are kind of deeply involved in AI. That said, maybe today it is. I mean, I don't know what the shape of things would be in 6 months. So there is obviously one niche domain where there are researchers developing models. So that is something that we probably don't need to talk about. I mean, I'm not sure if anyone in the audience is an actual researcher who has a PhD, who is looking to develop a model. That's most likely not the goal. But beyond that, every other profession is now an AI profession. So if you're building infrastructure for backend, your backend probably has an agent. The agent needs very specific AI infrastructure. So you have to build the AI infrastructure. Infrastructure engineering and backend engineering has long ceased to be separate things, by the way. I mean, just in case you're not aware, backend engineering and infrastructure engineering are kind of work very closely hand in hand. Maybe in very big companies, you don't get to know all of that, but even in mid-sized companies, infrastructure lives as code today. Infrastructure works very closely with backend engineering. Most likely, your product is completely AI or some part of it is AI, which means that it would need dedicated AI infrastructure. You need to understand that. ML ops or AI ops, it's kind of interchangeable. I mean, means roughly the same thing. And finally, application development. Application development, you might not be the one building the model, but you are still using AI to build the model. You will still be working on eval. You will still be working on observability. And all of these things are very different when it comes to the AI domain. Observability used to be just a niche domain of companies that were only into microservices. If you had just one monolithic service, you probably don't need to worry. I mean, you can just log and see what's going on with your application. That's not the case. OpenTelemetry used to be a unique standard for observability. Today, there is OpenLLmetry, which is an additional standard just to observe and look into the microservices. Uh, I mean, giving out AI logs. So what I'm again trying to kind of harp down is every role, every profession is getting AI enabled. So the best way to prepare yourself in this direction is to be AI aware yourself. Sorry about that. So I have covered this in a general way. I mean, we don't have to go into each one of them. Software engineers are most likely going to work on some product or some form which uses AI. Again, I mean, if you take a step back and think, this is a common question that I get often, that but not all AI industries or all industries are AI industries. So this is a delusion, actually. So if you think that the slowest adoption of AI is probably in the financial sector, like the banking industry, banks would be very, very slow because they really need to be deterministically correct. They can't go with a probabilistic model, even with the support or anything like that. But even banks are moving. And every single industry is being disrupted by one company, which brings in top-notch AI, and that disrupts every other company in that industry. This is a reality that you cannot stay away from. So no matter what the industry is, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's brick and mortar, whether it's banking, every industry is shifting and pivoting into an AI industry. I mean, this is the new form of technology. And you can even think of it in a way that if probably most of you haven't actually done any engineering back in the 90s, but in the 90s, UI UX was like an optional thing. It used to be really, really bad. But then even for some of the products that UI UX existed, I mean, obviously the world didn't run inside the web browser, but even for the ones that they existed, it used to be terrible. I mean, actually. So, but you see the way UI UX industry completely shifted the experience. Now, literally, you experience the whole world, or every software that you work with, you work it through the web browser. The AI is that kind of a change which is happening to the industry. Every single industry, every single role, every single definition is being redefined by AI. So you need to step up and be aware of that. Uh, Finally, I mean, this was very philosophical and high level. If you join Interview Kickstart, these are the courses that Interview Kickstart specifically covers, where you can hands-on build an AI or an agentic system, which lets you be aware of AI. So I talked a lot about how the industry is changing and how you need to be AI aware. The key question, I guess, which I left blank, was how do you be AI aware? Now, you can read journals and read the news and go all over the place to be AI aware, to learn about AI, or you can actually go and build hands-on project and learn the same thing in a much condensed span of time. Learning about things by reading and passive learning only gets you so much. Unless you actually use the thing and really write code to build it, you really don't understand the system. And this is, just to be very, very clear, this is not just software engineers. These are even non-technical roles. If you're a TPM, you would be expected to use AI. And as a TPM also, maybe you don't need to do all the projects and get into too involved into very complex projects and which have multiple things, but these are still the expectation would be you know how to use an API and build an AI agent or a simple chatbot and stuff. And there are many low-code options to do that. But without being hands-on and without actually implementing things, you won't learn. So Interview Kickstart does present you an option where you can go in and actually build out these projects and learn things for yourself. Yeah, I guess, yeah. So this is at a high level. These are the things that, if you have a portfolio where you can display that you have actually done these projects, even not just the portfolio. Number one, of course, the portfolio helps you in a company that they see that you have taken interest in learning. That's a very, very strong signal for any roles whatsoever. But it also helps you learn your existing business and existing company and kind of make yourself more future proof and few in terms of employability. Yep, that's, I guess, my section. Senad, back to you. Senad, are you there? I'll stop sharing.
Hello. Yeah, sorry. Trying to navigate a PowerPoint. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Hold on just a second. How about right now?
No, we see your camera.
I think who's currently sharing? Is it you, Ashish? We can see the screen though.
Are you
Yeah, we can
sorry,
see
which
the
one?
screen. Sinath,
Can you see the
challenge in the
presentation?
interview prep, how IK solves these challenges.
Okay, so you can see the presentation, right?
Yeah, we can. We can see you too.
Okay. Okay. All right. Sounds great. So I'll try to blast through next few slides because I want to make sure that we have enough time to answer Q&A. That being one of the more important things that folks are probably interested in. The next section focuses about what are some of the high-level challenges in general when it comes to interview preparation for technical roles. One of the first common challenge is the structure and focus gap. So as part of that. Understanding which role you should be interviewing for and what are your gaps relative to that role. Also figuring out how you do close those gaps, where to go, and so on. So a lot of time spent researching and figuring out, say, technical gaps versus behavioral gaps. Having some sort of roadmap on how to get there, because if you treat getting a job as a project, so having some sort of a working backwards plan on how to get there, that a lot of times folks struggle with that without guidance, without those clear prioritization and lack of consistency. Within the IK, the way this is solved is there is the curriculum built for all 17 of those programs, those tracks, based on the FAANG interviewing processes. Everything's in one place, meaning whether it's technical or domain-specific domain-specific areas or behavioral or leadership, everything's covered in one place through a large network of engineers and managers that work for the IK that lead the different courses and so on as they specialize in those. Like I mentioned, there's 17 different tracks with different content that is focused on those tracks. There's 6 month support system in terms of class retakes, utilizing all the mocks that are provided and ongoing coaching. I'll let at the end of the presentation, I believe we have a slide on this. So Rohan, I'll let you speak a little bit more details around the what's covered, what's included, and so on. Second challenge is the calibration and speed. Working under pressure in interview setting, it's something that folks often fail. So you can be a great coder, but if you're not able to translate that when the time comes in the actual interview, it's obviously not ideal. Same applies to system design. The same definitely applies to behavioral as well. So not being able to think quick on the spot around answering the question, providing great data points, articulating why examples are bar raising, and so on. Level mismatch is another problem where as you're entering for a new company or you're planning to enter for a new company, that calibration on, let's say, if I'm a principal engineer in one company, does that translate to principal engineer another or whatever other role is, right? So having more guidance around that is one of the opportunities, and that's one of the things that folks struggle in. Bar or a benchmark for that role, or whatever the role at a specific company they're entering for. So a lot of times there's mismatch in expectations. So that's one of the other common issues. The way that's all the IK, there is level-wise coaching and guidance. So as part of that, the instructors that are coaching workshops specific to their programs, they are experts in the field. They understand what is generally the bar. Mock interviewers, same thing. So as you are having a guidance, coaching, or mock interview sessions, they're able to provide level and gap analysis and guidance around the level, what is appropriate level, what are the gaps that you need to work on in order to meet the criteria or raise the bar at a particular level at the company and so on. Mock interviews, they focus on basically mimicking what happens in the real world, but also provide a rich feedback around the ideas how to improve, what examples to use, not to use, and what are things to focus on offline and so on. The next challenge is the isolation and the not having continuous feedback. Folks a lot of times are preparing alone or with their buddies and so on. The guidance might be limited because the bar for a specific company they're into for folks might not be aware, or you yourself might not be aware. There's also issue of finding reliable partners to have mock interviews with and so on. So especially when it comes to across different areas. So the technical, including coding, system design, AI related, and then behavioral, including leadership and so on, depending on the role. It's hard to find mock interviews that cover all those things. In a real world, when it comes to the full loops at FAANG companies and beyond. These are split across multiple loops and multiple interviewers that are great at evaluating those different areas, and that's also what works during the preparation as well. So as part of that, through the IK, there are mock interviewers specializing in different competencies. So for instance, there's folks specifically doing the data structures, algorithms, coding mock interviews. There's specific folks for system design. There's specific folks for behavioral or leadership and so on, depending on the role that you're applying to interview for. There's also active learning community. Folks are split into cohorts. So there's also collaboration and forming study groups and 24-hour support. Again, Rohan, I'll let you speak about that part toward the end of the presentation. I think there might be a separate slide on that. Challenge number 4 is behavior and storytelling. So this one is important for behavioral things. One of the common reasons why folks fail behavioral across levels, so all the way from junior engineer to VP. Common reason number 1 is they pick example that's not bar raising, right? They think they have a great example, but it's actually not a great example, right? So they basically come up with wrong stories. So that's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is they might have a great example, but they're not able to articulate it. So for behavioral, for your main answers for behavioral questions, typically you want to have a nice story, 3 to 5 minutes long. That's in a great format, easy for interviewer to digest, to understand all the main selling points, why it's bar raising, why it was complex, impactful, how did you go above and beyond, and so on, right? So ability to articulate that and cover a great story, great example that you have, having issues in doing so is another common issue. Similar thing applies to resumes as well. So you might have a significant experience. It might be a great match for a particular job, but it's not reflected in a resume, and therefore you don't even get a chance for the interview. Confidence is another thing. Depending on a candidate, some candidates naturally might have a little bit lower confidence. Through mock interviews and some of the guidance around the interview process itself, can address the lack of confidence issues. Through the IK, there is help around building your story bank, right? So for having a X number of stories that are covering, depending on a role, how many stories you're going to have, it might depend on the role, but having a good set of stories that are covering all the main competencies that are likely to be asked, and having a good stories, not just good stories, but also good framework in how to articulate and cover those stories. ideally mapping them to the company's culture or principles, if you know the company they're interviewing for, or a type of company. So, for instance, a lot of FAANG companies have on a high level similar leadership structure, or on the high level, cultural aspects they're looking for. Similar thing for resume and LinkedIn overhaul to make sure that that's coming clear in those forums. And then also there is offer negotiation and coaching offered at that last phase. Moving to the next one is, I think the last challenge we're covering today. What is the modern bar when it comes to design, domain, and AI? So system design, it's very important across pretty much all levels. The only roles where system design might not be covered is the program management. Although in some cases, for program managers in tech, or program managers that will be working on technical programs, depending on a company, system design, at least on a high level, might be covered as well. So it's important to brush up on those and practice the interviewing. The main specific knowledge calls, also same thing, depending on what kind of role you're interviewing for, especially for specialty roles as well. AI expertise. So as excuse me, as Sam was mentioning, AI expertise, at least some level, is important. How much it depends on a company role and level and so on, right? But it is growing in importance and so on. And artifacts are also important, especially for individual contributor roles. So having artifacts that are incorporated in your stories and that could be used as a reference, in some cases, are critical and asked for. In terms of the solution for that through the IK, there's a separate system design sessions, both workshops, classes, and as part of that, going through some of the common system design scenarios, how to solve it, why, the trade-offs, and so on. System design interviews as well, and as part of that, having one-on-one guidance is also provided. There's also, in addition to that, domain-specific deep dives. AI courses as well, including from scratch to more scalable systems, and help with building AI project portfolios.